Hello.
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 Hi there.
Hello and welcome to a very special lockdown edition of the RadioTimes.com Doctor Who podcast, broadcasting to you across the Subwave network.
Nice.
My name's Huw Fullerton.
My name is Morgan Jeffrey.
And this week we're talking all about the 11th Hour, Matt Smith's debut episode, which aired on BBC One 10 years ago this week in 2010. But before that, we're going to talk quickly about a different sort of hour, an hour of need. Because you see what I did there? Because we'd be remiss in this podcast if we didn't mention what's been going on in the world. Everyone's kind of at home, stuck at home in lockdown or self-isolation. And Doctor Who fans have been coming together, lifting our spirits and cheering themselves up with all sorts of different things. There's been screenings, which were called, I think, Doctor Who Lockdown. There's been one of the Day of the Doctor, one of Rose, which we couldn't mention in our podcast last week because we had time travelled from the past and recorded that one. And there was one of Vincent and the Doctor. And then the next one is actually going to be the 11th Hour. It's as if we planned it, but we were going to do this anyway. I guess they're using the same anniversaries as us. But yeah, it's been quite cool, hasn't it? Like, just to see people kind of do these things.
It's been really nice, actually. It's been a much-needed injection of positivity, I think, into Doctor Who fan discourse. Because, when the current series is airing, there are it can be quite polarizing, and people have very strong opinions one way or another. So it's been nice to revisit some of these classic episodes, and as I say, just see an outpouring of positivity from fandom, I think.
Yeah, and we've also seen some Doctor Who things like Big Finish is doing still releasing stuff and trying to do some remote recording, I think. And there also the Doctor Who convention was done virtually online the other day, which is fun. And there's been loads of new Doctor Who stuff released, like new short stories from Russell T Davies and Chris Chibnall, a little scene from Stephen Moffat, a little audio thing from Russell T Davies. Jodie Whittaker giving us all tips as the Doctor. That was cool.
That was lovely, especially for younger viewers. I think quite reassuring to actually see the Doctor talking directly to them about the situation that she and they find themselves in. Yeah, it's been really nice. I know you, of course, wrote an article sort of celebrating Doctor Who fandom's response to this current situation we're all in. And it has been really nice, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, enough of that. Nonsense. Enough of the niceness, because we also are here to talk specifically about the 11th Hour. So the next Doctor Who rewatch, we've spoiled for ourselves because we watched the 11th Hour ahead of time for this.
Have to watch it again.
Have to watch it again and follow the tweets from whoever. But yeah, it's interesting to watch this because we obviously just did Rose last week. So we recently watched Rose. And this obviously it's pretty much dead on 5 years after Rose, give or take a week, that this came out. And it's interesting to see what it does differently. Do you know what I mean? As a kind of introductory episode for a Doctor and companion, and also as a kind of reboot of the show in terms of like David Tennant, was hugely popular, and he left kind of at the peak of his popularity almost. And so Matt Smith coming in was like, it's funny to think because people love Matt Smith now, but at the time he was controversial. People didn't know who he was.
He was the youngest ever Doctor at the time. I mean, he still is in terms of, there's not been anyone who's taken on the role who's been younger since. And I think, Stephen Moffat has been quite frank about it, that he said, everyone expected it to fail. Much like when Doctor Who returned in 2005, but possibly even more so because, David Tennant and Russell T Davies, I think everyone sort of assumed that they were the show at that point. And Stephen Moffat said the BBC even came close to cancelling Doctor Who when they found out that both David and Russell were leaving. They thought, well, can the show continue on without them? So the 11th Hour arguably had as much to prove as Rose did.
Definitely. And I mean, I think it comes out of the gate swinging. Like, it does something really clever in that we are all meeting this new Doctor, but immediately it makes the Doctor old to Amy. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's clever in that it creates these stakes in this relationship immediately. So it's almost not like you have to understand why this companion would travel with the Doctor so quickly like you do in Rose. It's like, she's known the Doctor her whole life. He's just only known her for a day. Like, it's the kind of thing that we saw with River Song before this, and we came to know very well in the Stephen Moffat years.
Well, this is it, in that now knowing sort of everything that is to come from the Stephen Moffat era, you recognise a lot of the familiar tropes. And again, that comparison to Rose, it's interesting. Both episodes start off with that crash zoom into Earth.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say that, yeah.
Which is something I picked up on as you did, when we watched, because we watched the two episodes quite close together. But then from then on, it very definitely feels like Stephen Moffat era Doctor Who, even though at the time we didn't necessarily know what that was. But looking back on it now, it definitely feels like a clear departure from the Russell T Davies Who in sort of style and tone and look, and everything we now associate with Stephen's era is very much there from the beginning.
Well, it's funny as well because there's something I always think about this episode is that I remember at the time watching it, I was like, oh, here's the new supporting cast, here's this character, here's that character who we'll get to know. And obviously we get to know Rory quite a lot. We don't really realise how important Rory is at this stage. But you never see any of these characters ever again.
No.
Like, I sort of assumed we'd see Jeff with his laptop again.
Or like Crosby.
Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, so these guys will pop up again in the finale. No, gone forever. Like Amy's parents stood up in the finale, gone forever.
Yeah, it's a very different sort of. Again, it's a very different sort of Doctor Who, where with the Russell T Davies era, you had these established supporting players, and I think Stephen Moffat's interest is more specifically in the Doctor companion dynamic.
Definitely. So yeah, we should talk a little bit briefly just about the plot. I mean, everyone listening to this probably knows what it is, but yeah, basically the basic plot is the Doctor's regenerating. He crash lands the TARDIS into Amy Pond's garden, or Amelia Pond, when she's a little kid. She helps him out. He finds the crack in her wall, the crack which would become the big sort of twisty important thing of this series. And then yeah, he has barely any time to, he jumps forward in time, meets as an adult, and barely has any time to save the world from Prisoner Zero and the Atraxi. And yeah, it's quite interesting because I remember at the time, it was kind of almost written as like, in David Tennant's first episode, he's regenerating and he just lies in bed for like half the episode because it's that thing. In this, Matt Smith's going through the same thing, but can't do that. Like he just keeps on having to push forward. And, it's quite funny because when you watch it, every single thing he does is like a mistake, or it gets broken, or like, he does the TARDIS wrong, and he crashes the TARDIS, and then he goes to the wrong place, and then he he can't convince Amy not to go in this room, and then he drops the Sonic, then the Sonic breaks from his one idea, and then his next idea is, do the computer code thing, and then that doesn't work, and you know what I mean? And it kind of is just like almost like he's learning a little bit on the go as well.
And I don't mean Matt Smith, because Matt Smith I think is fantastic from the off, but he's sort of learning how to be the Doctor again up until that final face-off with the Atraxi, where he very much then finally comes into his own. And that final scene is interesting because as Rory says, he defeats the aliens, sends them away, and then calls them back. So from a story perspective, in terms of moving the story on, you don't really need that final showdown. It's purely there as a showcase for Matt Smith as the Doctor, but the episode absolutely benefits from having that scene in there.
Definitely. I mean, it's funny to watch now with all the here's all the Doctor's past, and you're like, oh, what a cool Easter egg. Because now you're like, where are the other 55?
Yeah. But again, because for most people, they saw, I think, wrongly, but they saw Christopher Eccleston maybe at this point as a bit of a blip, and David Tennant was Doctor Who. So to have, the goal to have Matt Smith literally step through David Tennant's face onto the screen and say, I'm the Doctor, I think is incredibly bold and brilliant.
I love also at the end of that episode, weirdly, I love the trailer. I don't know if you watched. Did you watch the trailer?
No, I watched it and then immediately wanted to watch all of Series 5 again.
Yeah, I really liked Series 5. I think that I think people do rate it as a series, although I think some people don't. But I just think it was just very exciting. It's kind of like watching Rose. I was like, I remember being super excited by that first series.
I think it's my favorite of the modern series.
Yeah, it's really fun and interesting, and there's a really nice, breadth of episodes. Like, for example, Vincent and the Doctor, which the Doctor Who, rewatch thing happened the other day. That's so different to other ones. I think it's good. It's got a really good line of one-off episodes, if that makes sense. Interesting thing about this episode, though, the 11th Hour, is, would you agree? It feels it isn't low stakes because it's about the destroying of the world, but it feels quite low stakes. Presumably it's pretty low budget, as an episode. It's mainly just in this one little village, and the Doctor sort of rushing around. The eyes are probably quite expensive, the Atraxi, but apart from that.
Although and I love this episode, but I think the CGI in this episode is maybe worse than sort of the standard. It's a little weak. It doesn't really matter. You don't really care because I think the rest of this episode works so well. But yeah, visually it's got a few flaws. But no, you're right in that this episode, much like Rose, it's very different to Rose, but it also is quite low key. In the same way that Rose is, it's quite a small scale plot.
Yeah.
It does involve, a villain threatening to obliterate the entire Earth, so it's as small scale as Doctor Who ever gets. But but no, it does feel, and the plot as well. I'm not sure a lot of the plot makes a huge amount of sense if you examine it for too long. Why did Prisoner Zero just lurk around for 12 years?
Why did
Why does it?
prisoners? Why does everyone know about the cracks except for Doctor? Like,
Why does Amy think it's a good idea when she's found a strange man in her house to dress up as a policewoman? There's a lot, there's a lot of it that doesn't quite hold up. But again, like Rose, it doesn't really matter that the plot is a little thin because it's kind of the window dressing to the relationship between the Doctor and the companion.
yeah, I think as well, like, as much as you mentioned the CGI there, I think the look of the episode's really good because it was quite a big departure from what it had looked like before. And like, I think there's some really nice shots in there. Like, there's that shot of when the Doctor shows Amy the apple, which I think I saw on Doctor Who Confidential, or whatever it was, that they like actually slowed that shot down by like a bit, like just to sort of really have the gaze between them. And just stuff like that. I think it looks really fun. I love that they have that one instance of the Doctor's Sherlock-like ability to notice everything, which never comes up again. Like, never once. I think I remember saying it was very difficult to get the dog to stop moving. So I think that was the issue with that.
You're right about the I love that scene with the apple where the Doctor presents the grown-up Amy with the apple with the little smiley face carved into it, which she gave him when she was younger. So she now knows that he is telling the truth about being a time traveler. Because I think the episode up until that point is, again, it's been quite rapid fire. And although Matt Smith and Karen Gillan are great throughout it, they're kind of, rushing about the place. It's all a bit mad. It's all a bit of a mad dash. And that's the first moment in that episode that you get to breathe a little bit. And I think that's where you really see the chemistry between them start to really spark.
I think so too, yeah. It's interesting to watch, isn't it? Like, I mean, as well, like, I sort of forgotten that Amy pretends not to be Scottish for a while. Like, she's just sort of doing a very strange voice that's quite like her own voice. Until, like, and then when she does say, "Oh, why did you say 5 minutes?" or whatever. I think it's supposed to be a reveal that she's Scottish. And I was like, you kind of sounded Scottish anyway. Like, I don't think I even noticed that when I watched it on broadcast. Also, because we all knew that she was Amy Pond, and like it's not really a twist. It's only a twist for the Doctor, really.
Yeah. But I think this episode, I think it holds up. Having had a slightly mean dig at the CGI, I do think the look of it holds up. I think the performances hold up incredibly well. There's like Rose, there's the odd little reference that dates it, like Rory being like, "I have a camera on my phone."
It's also a camera, and I was like, "All right, big shot."
And I think the Doctor makes a Bebo reference at one point. But that aside, I still think it holds up really well as an hour of television.
Yeah, and Ledworth's kind of a timeless little town, isn't it? So it sort of holds up fine. It's interesting. It's sort of a less momentous episode than Rose in some ways, but in other ways, this was kind of the series trying to prove what it was again. And I think you do that with every Doctor. And I think we saw with Deep Breath with Peter Capaldi and with The Woman Who Fell to Earth with Jodie Whittaker. Like, I still think the 11th Hour is probably, with the Christmas Invasion, probably the best. I think 11th Hour is probably a little bit better than Christmas Invasion in terms of like really cementing like this new Doctor for people. Do you know what I mean?
Well, yeah, because as you mentioned, David Tennant spends a lot of Christmas Invasion in bed. And then also, pretty much all Doctors, very few of them come fully formed in their first episode. And there's always like a bit of a journey of discovery that goes on with the actors and the writers, trying to find the Doctor. And David Tennant's Doctor does evolve quite a bit after Christmas Invasion. But then I think, Matt's Doctor is pretty firmly established in this idea of the raggedy Doctor in 11th Hour. But I think the writing is fairly consistent. I think his performance, interestingly, although I think he's great in this, his performance does clearly evolve throughout his era. He's slightly more laddish, I think, in this.
Oh, definitely. When you get to the Lodger as well, like I think he's sort of the like young cool guy.
Yeah, who's great at football. He's a bit, what he is a bit more Matt Smith. If you see Matt Smith, if you know Matt Smith, that's what he's like. He speaks a bit more like that. He acts a bit more like that. Whereas later on, it's more of a performance, I think, in terms of his Doctor's a little bit more heightened. He's a little bit more posh. And it was quite a gradual evolution at the time, which you didn't really notice so much. But if you jump back from a later episode to the 11th Hour, you do notice that shift.
I did like that bit where he and Amy are in the TARDIS, and he sort of goes, "Yeah, you're coming." Do you know what I mean? Like he just sort of is just so confident with it. I think that's definitely something that he has here, which he kind of like you say, that almost laddish confidence kind of does sort of go, and he becomes a bit more sort of not professorial exactly, but a bit more sort of dithery.
He becomes a bit more like a bit more tweedy as well.
Yes, exactly. Ironically.
Yeah. I think that scene though, that final scene of them in the TARDIS is one of my favorite Doctor Who scenes. I love it. There's a real nice moment of chemistry between them. The moment where he says, "I'm definitely a madman with a box," and then he sort of laughs and does a little spin, and she laughs at him. And it may well have all been written, but it feels very unscripted. It feels like he's mucking about a bit. Matt Smith, that is, and Karen Gillan's actually reacting to what he's doing in the moment.
Totally, and those lines could come off quite cringeworthy.
Yeah,
depending on how they would live. And I think it kind of also, to be honest, partly because there's so many things in this where he said, look, the girl who waited, Amelia Pond, I'm definitely a madman with a box. It's like these are things that have kind of entered the sort of lexicon of the show so much that we're so familiar with them. But this is just, a turn of phrase in an episode that obviously just hit home so well that they became, things that you put on t-shirts and stuff. And I think like you said, it's a testament to those performances that you kind of do just swallow it. And also partly because it is a little bit wry. It is, the Doctor having a bit of a laugh. He's not entirely taking himself seriously. Incidentally, what do we think about the TARDIS, the initial Matt Smith TARDIS? Because I know it's a controversial one.
I've always quite liked it.
I quite like it as well.
Yeah,
I think people are going to hate us for this, but I've grown to love it. But I initially didn't like the second Matt Smith TARDIS. I thought it was too basic.
Yeah, and I think Matt Smith's second TARDIS looks better when it's Peter Capaldi's TARDIS.
100%, yeah.
When they tweak it slightly.
Well, they put more stuff in it, and they make the orange lights nicer and stuff. And actually, I do think that is a lovely TARDIS now. Now I'm used to it, stylish and stuff. But the thing I liked about the Matt Smith one is I get that people kind of think it's a bit mad or whatever, and a bit sort of got plasticky. But
it's very orange.
It's very orange, but I think I just love the scale of it. I think it's the best scale the TARDIS has had. I love the sort of multiple levels and the Doctor hanging in a sling, fixing the core and all that stuff. It felt really big, and it felt different to the David Tennant one. It felt kind of grander.
Yeah, and it's quite oddball and quite all over the place, which suits the 11th Doctor.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because we had a lot of great shots of the Peter. I'm going to call it the Peter Capaldi TARDIS, the Michael Pickwood Peter Capaldi TARDIS. That was always shot really nicely. But I think this was the first TARDIS where they started to experiment a bit with shooting. Do you know what I mean? Because it felt like the David Tennant, Christopher Eccleston era one was always shot in quite similar ways. Because it was missing that wall basically. Whereas this one, you kind of did. I think it was also missing a wall because I think the other one was the first 360 one. But I felt like you could sort of move around in it a bit more. There was a bit more room for kind of stuff. And there's an episode that's half set in it, the Amy's Choice one.
Yeah.
And you don't really feel it, because there's so many places for people to go.
Right. It doesn't feel claustrophobic.
Definitely. And even, the most recent TARDIS, Jodie Whittaker's one, they added some stairs and immediately it felt like there was a bit more going on. This one's full of stairs. There's stairs everywhere. Stairs for days. Anyway, we should probably save some of that for if we ever do a TARDIS special. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, listen, thank you so much all for listening. That's us chatting about the 11th Hour. We will hopefully be back for more of these Doctor Who podcasts going forward. It's slightly more of a challenge to record them this way, but we will keep doing it for as long as we're able. But yeah, thank you. Like I said a second ago, thank you for listening. Please check out all our Doctor Who content on radiotimes.com. We've got loads of stuff about Jodie Whittaker's next series, and we've got some, fun stuff going on. We're getting people to vote for their favourite series. So if you are a big fan of Series 5, like we've been talking about today, you can vote for that, for what your favourite modern series is, and you can read all about Doctor Who in general. And don't forget to, take part in the 11th Hour watch-along. The Doctor Who lockdown thing, if you're so inclined. There should be details on radiotimes.com, and they're on Twitter. You can find them on Twitter. Anyway, thank you for listening for a third time. I've been Huw Fullerton.
I've been Morgan Jeffrey.
And goodbye. Geronimo.